My brother said it the way someone announces a flight delay. Flat. Unbothered. Like the information had nothing to do with me at all. Mom and Dad signed the papers last Thursday. The house is sold. I was standing in the kitchen of that same house holding a mug that had been in the cabinet since I was 7 years old. I didn't say anything. I set the mug down carefully on the counter and I looked at him. They got a good number, he said. He was already looking at his phone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I walked to the back door, looked out at the yard where my grandmother had planted rose bushes that were still blooming every June, and I made a decision. I was going to find out exactly what had been done before I said a single word to anyone. My parents had lived in that house for 31 years. My grandmother had lived there before them. She bought it in 1974 with money she saved working double shifts at the textile mill in town. And when she died, she left it to my mother, with one condition written clearly in her will, that the house would pass to me when my mother was gone, because I was the one who had spent every summer there, who had helped my grandmother through her last years, who she said understood what the house meant. I knew that will existed. I had seen it. My grandmother had shown it to me herself, sitting at the kitchen table, the same table that was still there when I walked in that morning. She had said, "This is yours when the time comes. I want you to know." The time had apparently come and gone without me. My mother was in the living room when I came back inside. She was looking at paint samples, which struck me as odd until I realized she was probably thinking about her new place. She looked up and gave me a small smile that had something practiced in it. "Your brother told you," she said. "He did. It's a good offer. The market won't say like this." She said it the way you explain something to a child who doesn't understand money. My father came in from the hallway. He had a folder in his hand. He held it out to me without making eye contact. "We need your signature on a couple of things. Just a formality. The title company wants all family members on record." I looked at the folder, but I didn't take it. "What does my signature have to do with a house that's in your name?" I asked. My mother's smile didn't move. "It's just paperwork. It makes the closing cleaner." "If my name isn't on the deed," I said, "then I don't have anything to sign." My father set the folder on the table. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Don't make this into something it isn't." I picked up my keys. I told them I needed to think. I drove away from that house without signing anything, and I didn't go home. I went to the county recorder's office. The woman at the counter had reading glasses pushed up on her head and the look of someone who had answered the same 10 questions 10,000 times. I asked her if I could pull the deed history on a residential property. She gave me a form, pointed to a terminal, and went back to what she was doing. It took me about 4 minutes to find the record. The deed had been transferred 8 months ago. Not last Thursday. 8 months ago. My parents had transferred ownership of the house from themselves into a joint LLC, one I had never heard of. And then the LLC had entered into a purchase agreement with a development company 3 weeks after that. My brother's name was on the LLC. I sat there for a moment looking at the screen. 8 months. They had been planning this for 8 months while I came over for Sunday dinners and helped my mother carry groceries in from the car. I printed the records. Then, because I had already come this far, I asked the clerk if probate filings were also accessible. She said yes and pointed me to a different section of the system. I typed in my grandmother's name. The file came up. And there, attached to the probate record from 11 years ago, was a scanned document labeled Holographic Will, Unfiled, Flagged for Review. My grandmother's will, the one that named me. It had been submitted to the office as part of the probate process, logged, scanned, and then never formally entered into the proceeding. The estate had been closed without it. I stared at that label for a long time. The clerk with the reading glasses had come around the counter to file something nearby. I asked her quietly what it meant when a will was flagged for review but not filed. She stopped. She looked at the screen. She pulled her glasses down from her head and read for a moment. "It means someone submitted it," she said carefully, "but the probate court never received formal notification. It would have needed to be presented at the hearing." She paused. "If it wasn't, and the estate was already closed under intestate succession, that's a problem." "What kind of problem?" I asked. She looked at me. "The kind that needs an attorney." I called my husband on the way to the car. He had known something was wrong from the moment I'd texted him that morning saying, "Don't make plans tonight." He listened without interrupting while I told him everything. When I finished, he said, "What do you need?" I said I needed a probate attorney who wasn't going to charge me $300 just to hear the situation. He knew someone, a woman his colleague had used for an estate dispute the previous year. He texted me her number before I even got home. Her name was Yvonne. She had an office above a dry cleaning shop and a voice that sounded like she had heard every variation of family betrayal there was and remained completely unimpressed by all of it. I sat across from her desk that same afternoon and laid out the documents I'd printed. She went through them without speaking. Then she set them down and folded her hands. "Your grandmother submitted a holographic will to the probate clerk during your mother's estate proceeding," she said. "Holographic means handwritten and signed. No witnesses required in this state. If it was valid, it should have been presented to the court. It wasn't. The estate closed based on the assumption that your mother was the sole beneficiary under the intestate rules." "Can we still use it?" I asked. "The estate is closed, but a will can still be admitted for probate after the fact if it can be shown it existed and was improperly excluded. Given that it's in the county's own system, they scanned it themselves. The documentation is on your side." She picked up the deed transfer page. "This, however, is a separate issue. Your parents transferred the property into an LLC without disclosing a potential competing claim. If your grandmother's will gives you a valid interest in that property, this transfer may have been made in bad faith." "My mother signed the original probate affidavit," I said. "The one that said there were no other valid testamentary documents." Yvonne looked at me over the top of the papers. "Then your mother may have a perjury problem." I didn't call my parents. I didn't call my brother. I went home, I fed my dog, I sat at the kitchen table with my husband, and we ate dinner and talked about what came next. He asked me if I was okay. I told him I didn't know yet. I told him I felt like I was standing in a room where all the furniture had been moved 2 inches to the left. Everything looked familiar, but nothing was where it was supposed to be. Yvonne filed a petition to reopen the probate estate the following Monday. She also filed an emergency motion to cloud the title on the property, which meant the sale to the development company could not close until the court resolved the competing claim. The title company called my parents within 24 hours. My brother called me that same evening. He was not using his flat, unbothered voice anymore. "You had no right," he said. "You knew what was happening, and you didn't say anything, and now you're blowing up a deal that took 8 months to put together." "I know it took 8 months," I said. "I saw the filing date." There was silence. "Mom and Dad needed this," he said, quieter now. "They needed the money." "Then they should have told me about Grandma's will," I said. "They should have told the probate court about it 11 years ago." He didn't have an answer for that. My mother called the next morning. Her voice was controlled in the way that meant she was working very hard to keep it that way. She said she wanted to sit down and talk through this like a family. She said there had been a miscommunication about the will, that she genuinely hadn't known it would affect the property, that her attorney at the time had told her the estate was straightforward. I asked her if she remembered signing the affidavit that stated there were no other testamentary documents. The line was quiet for a moment. "I need you to drop this," she said. "Please." "I'm not going to do that," I said. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, Yvonne uncovered something else. The development company had done a title search before entering into the purchase agreement. Standard procedure. Their search had flagged the same probate record mine had. The unfiled will with the review notation. They had noted it internally and proceeded anyway, apparently calculating that a decades-old handwritten document from a deceased woman was unlikely to cause problems before closing. Their legal team had written a memo about it. The memo surfaced in discovery. That memo changed things considerably. It meant the buyer had known about a potential competing claim and had not disclosed it to my parents, or if they had disclosed it to my parents had not disclosed it to me. Either way, the transaction had moved forward with knowledge that the title was not clean. Yvonne presented this to the court alongside the petition to reopen the estate. The judge, a woman about 60, with the patience of someone who had sat through a great many things she found tedious, read through the documents without expression. Then she looked up. She said the will appeared on its face to be valid. She said the failure to present it to the probate court 11 years ago raised questions that would need to be examined. She said she was granting the petition to reopen the estate and ordering the title, cloud, to remain in place pending full resolution. Then she looked at the affidavit my mother had signed and said she was referring it to the district attorney's office for review. My mother was sitting 2 rows behind me. I didn't turn around. I heard my brother exhale sharply. I heard my mother say something quiet to her attorney. I looked at the wood grain on the table in front of me, and I kept my face still. Outside the courthouse, my husband took my hand. We walked to the car without talking. The sun was in that late afternoon position where it comes at you sideways and makes everything look more significant than it probably is. In the weeks that followed, the development company withdrew from the purchase agreement rather than litigate a clouded title. My brother dissolved the LLC. The probate estate was formally reopened. The will was admitted, and after several additional months of proceedings, the house was transferred into my name. My grandmother had been gone for 11 years. I had spent 11 years believing the house was simply gone, that it had passed to my mother cleanly, and that whatever she chose to do with it was her right. I had made peace with that, or I thought I had. Finding out it was never supposed to go that way was not the relief I expected it to be. It was more complicated than that. Grief and anger don't always arrive separately. The district attorney's office sent my mother a letter. I don't know exactly what it said. Yvonne told me the matter was under review and that it could resolve in a number of ways: a formal charge, a deferred agreement, or a declination to prosecute. I didn't ask for updates after that. That part was out of my hands. My brother sent me a text message about 2 months after the hearing. It said, "I hope you got what you wanted." I didn't respond. What I wanted was for none of this to have happened. What I wanted was a family that would have sat around that same kitchen table and had a real conversation. What I wanted was to not know that my mother had signed a document swearing there were no other valid wills when she had watched her own mother write one out by hand at that table and slide it across to me. What I got was the house. I drove out there on a Saturday in late October. The rose bushes my grandmother had planted were bare for the season, just brown canes and thorns, but the roots were still there. They had been there for 50 years. They would come back in June the same way they always had. I sat on the back step for a while. I didn't go inside. I just sat there in the cold and listened to the neighborhood around me, a dog somewhere, a leaf blower, someone's kids, and I thought about the woman who had worked double shifts at the textile mill so that one day there would be something solid and real to pass down. She had found a way to make sure it got to the right person. I was not going to let it go again. I have not spoken to my mother, my father, or my brother since the day of the hearing. People who hear that sometimes flinch. They say things like, "But they're your family, or you'll regret it someday." I understand why they say it. I don't agree with it. Some things, once you see them clearly, cannot be unseen. Some decisions are not cruelty. They are just the only honest choice left. The house is mine. The rose bushes will bloom in June. That is enough. I've thought a lot about the moment I set that mug down on the counter and walked out the back door. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't even have the full picture yet. What I had was a quiet certainty that something was wrong, and the discipline not to speak before I knew what I was actually dealing with. That restraint, not the legal filing, not the court order, was the first real decision I made in this whole situation, and I think it was the most important one. There's something that happens when people believe they have the upper hand. They stop being careful. My brother handed me that news like it was already settled because he genuinely believed it was. My mother offered me a smile that was more management than warmth because she had already calculated that I would be difficult for a few days and then let it go. They had known me long enough to expect a certain kind of reaction: raised voices, tears, accusations, and they had prepared for that reaction. What they had not prepared for was silence, followed by action. That's what I mean when I say intelligence, in the deepest sense, isn't about knowing more than other people. It's about knowing when not to show your hand. It's about understanding that the most powerful move is sometimes the one nobody sees coming because it looks like nothing at all. My grandmother understood this. She was a woman who worked double shifts in a mill for years to buy a house, who wrote her wishes down by hand and made sure they were submitted to the court, who found a way to protect what she had built even from beyond her own life. She didn't have lawyers on retainer. She had clarity about what mattered and the follow-through to act on it. 11 years after she was gone, that document was still sitting in a county database waiting. The intention she put into it survived everything: the closed estate, the LLC, the purchase agreement, all of it. What gets passed down in a family isn't always what's written in a will. Sometimes it's a way of moving through the world, a refusal to be steamrolled, a belief that doing things the right way still matters even when no one is watching. I won't pretend the outcome made everything clean. I have a house now and I don't have a family, not in any functional sense of the word. That's a real loss and I don't minimize it. But I've come to understand that what I lost was a version of those relationships I had been choosing to believe in long after the evidence suggested otherwise. The court didn't take my family from me. The choices they made over 8 months of planning, while I sat at their table and helped carry in groceries, those choices did it. What I kept is something harder to name but more durable. A knowledge of my own judgment, a proof of concept that staying calm and doing the work produces results that anger never could, and a house with rose bushes that will come back in June, just like they always have. Because the roots go deep enough that nothing above ground can stop them. That is, I think, exactly what my grandmother intended to leave me.